Hello, folks. It's just hit 2 o'clock. We'll be starting the session shortly. I'm just going to give it a few moments to let people connect in before we kick off properly. Hey, Sal, nice to see you.
GM. Hey, Darren, how you doing?
GM, I'm great.
It's good.
Very good.
All right, we got people trickling in. So welcome, guys. Welcome to the first workshop of Hackaroo.
There's still time to hit the website, connect in.
Yeah. Let's explain how some of this is going to work. So basically, this is the first workshop, so expect some technical difficulties. But the idea is that the Google Meet is for communicating, asking questions, and interacting with us. This is also being recorded, so you can also contribute to this stream. But if you don't want to, that's fine. You can replay this later. So we're going to be streaming this 24/7. Woke up this morning with an idea thinking, you know what, you know how to use some streaming software. Why not let people around the world stream and watch the talent that we have down under? So obviously people like Darren, who are giving their time, can contribute to Hackaroo. So thank you, Darren. And 23 sessions now. There's going to be 23 sessions over the next 7 weeks for people to join in and contribute to making Hackaroo a success. I tweeted about an hour ago that one new sponsor has come on board. So the prize pool has actually doubled. And we're waiting for a few more to confirm, but it keeps going up higher and higher. So we look forward to hosting you guys over the next few weeks. Nearly 2 months it is. But yeah, let's get started with Darren. He's going to do the Startup Builders MVP guide. And I'll be in the background looking after the streaming to make sure it all goes as planned. All right. So good luck, Darren.
Thanks, Sal. I'm excited to see what people are going to be building over the next couple of weeks. And it times very nicely with the Coliseum Hackathon kicking in straight afterwards. So hopefully we'll get some projects kick through, start, and then roll through and really punch above our weight and show the talent that we've got here in Australia and New Zealand. All right, folks, so I'm going to get started on the presentation itself. I'm Darren Rogan, and my company's called Rogues Labs for the advisory. I'm also a builder, but just to give you a little bit of context, I've been doing entrepreneurship-y stuff for over 10 years, including startup accelerator programs. I've raised capital, Web 2, and then also Web 3. So I've worked with hundreds of founders. I've seen thousands of pitch decks. So hopefully this will give you a good idea of some distilled lessons. But the big one is sort of like, why did they fail? Because in a hackathon, you can sort of build anything that you want from a technical learning. But I'm hoping that we can help people move from the hackathon stage through into startup stage. It's never been a better time to be building new products. And I think that's the opportunity for Australia and New Zealand moving forward. So I'm going to focus a bit on the startup-y side as well as the technology side as well. So the main reason startups fail is lack of market need. And that means you're building stuff no one wants. Now, it's much better to figure that out as quickly as possible. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. The other one is running out of cash, right? So everyone's got their own sort of burn rate. You know, you've got bills to pay, you know, rent's not cheap here in Australia and New Zealand. So running out of cash is a big one. So you need to plan if you're going to like move this from a weekend side event over to like an actual startup, which we're hoping some people will do. You need to consider that time frame, budgeting, and execution. One of the biggest failures that I've seen over the year is not the right team. While you may be fantastic individually, you will generally need to build out a team. The age of the solo founder is not here just yet. I want to AI agent everything I can, but getting someone to join you on the journey, help you with marketing, help you with go live is probably stuff to start thinking about. And then also understanding the competitive landscape. Now, if I go to market and I launch something and I'm a small startup, I might be going into war in an open market with a very large competitor with a subpar product. So not only does there need to be a market need, for example, it's something people want to use, and that includes for entertainment, let's be clear, but you need to understand who else is in that marketplace so that you can look at how you bring something unique to that. And that uniqueness may be just that it's available globally and it's available around the world lightning fast on Solana, or it could be that you're able to take something that a competitor has and use it against them. Like think about Netflix, the blockbuster. So Netflix started with actually DVDs, and they did rentals with DVDs in the post before they went fully online, and that meant that they could do it at significantly cheaper because they didn't have that front of office space, that high street space you needed to pay for. So sometimes think about the competitive advantage that we have building on chain, that we can do stuff significantly less costs and be competitive in that market space. And the other big one is pricing issues. No one wants to pay, but at the same time, one of the biggest problems with startups is undercharging. So, there's no, like, the reality in pricing is like there's a sweet spot for pricing that people are happy to pay. And underpricing, say you're only going to do something for $1 or like 50 cents or a couple of bucks, that means that you need a significantly more customers in order to be sustainable. So try to consider like what is optimum pricing based on what people are willing to pay for you in order to do this service. How much does it cost? How many customers do you need to do? But one big issue that I've seen is people undercharging and then going out of business because they're not able to get those customers. And a lot of the customers would have actually paid more money for the service that they're looking for. So there are some of the main failure points to consider. You will make mistakes. You will make failures, like startups and launching products on like offline, not offline, but on chain, and like Web 2 and Web 3 is still hard, folks. So don't beat yourself up if you make a mistake. You will learn from those mistakes. Like hackathons are a great place to sort of experiment, do something that you wouldn't normally consider, learn a new technology, and understand that this is much more about learning to skate rather than you definitively having to get what you want. Like most startups I know have pivoted, even in Web 2 and in Web 3, that the initial idea that they started with isn't the one that they took to market. So I wanted to make that very clear. So the big thing that I would say is like come at this from like a builder's focus. A lot of people will tell you a lot of things around startups and how to take things to market, but there is sort of like the principle of like, how do we navigate some of this stuff? How do we make better decisions? And I think most people on this call would agree with me that trying not to get like 100% correct, but trying to get more correct. So you're trying to create like an iterative testing mechanism, test-driven development for any of the technologists people here. That has been a very good way of sort of understanding you're on the right path. And I think too many people try to figure out everything from the start. I personally continue to do testing on what I think my product's going to be, what I think my market's going to be, and I've been pivoting my current project as well as what I take to market is not necessarily resonating the way that I want, or I get some feedback to tell me that some of the things creates like a delay, which could then have a user drop off. So we're going to go through some core principles, but the big thing is to focus on iterations, especially in hackathons. Build something fast, knock it out the door, see if anyone wants to use it, and then we improve. So build the scaffolding really quickly, and then you'll end up polishing for a long time and iterating and changing. The journey is basically these 4 main steps when you want to build something. Is doing a bit of market research, right? So trying to see if there's an existing application in market, trying to see if there are competitors in there. Is it something people want to do? And then defining like your minimum viable product, which is what MVP stands for. That is supposed to be the product, which is the smallest feature set that meets a value in the market that people will pay for, which, in crypto terms means someone will pay the gas fees, someone will use it, someone will put liquidity into a pool. There has to be something there of value. You're doing your market research. You might do a lot of prototypes. I have prototypes which I wouldn't class as an MVP because they're not really customer focused. They're more about market research. So during this hackathon, you may be doing some build stuff, which is more part of your research to then determine the scoping of what that product looks like. It's much easier and better to like ask people, do they like A or do they like B, rather than getting them to speak in the abstract about what your product could be. Once you have an MVP or a rough nugget of what you want to build, then just start building straight away. Like, it's never been easier and cheaper to start building with some of the tools. And I'll go through some tools towards the end of the talk that you can use to do some interfaces, etc., to get stuff out the door. But with AI, this process is significantly cheaper and significantly easier to be able to keep iterating. Once I've got an MVP, or I've got a website, or I've got something that's explaining what I'm doing, I'm going to start doing customer validation. And I will talk about customer validation a bit more in another talk. But customer validation isn't necessarily just asking your friends what you want. You want constructive feedback. There's a lot of value in that customer validation, so really don't skip it, because what you can end up doing is just building a very good technical solution. And in a hackathon, that's completely great, folks, right? You can just have as much fun as you want with the tech. But if you want to take it to the next level and actually, be your own boss or launch a product into the market, then you really want to listen to what advice, negative and positive, that you're receiving, and then iterate on that as quickly as possible. Anything that you've done, you've rarely learned to walk or skate or cycle first go. So remember that taking these 6 steps and just repeating them. So once you do your customer validation, you iterate, you then go back to your market research, sort of go like, okay, with the new information at hand, is that changing what the product is? Is there now a new competitor I need to be concerned with? Or is there now a big player that I need to differentiate myself from? Redefine what that MVP is, and then start building again. They may sound like big, long steps, but you can continue to iterate on this pipeline in days and weeks, realistically, depending on your customer segment and how you're going to get to people. So one of the big things is like customer discovery. So there's a guy called Steve Blank, an academic in Silicon Valley, who really who sort of coined this term of customer discovery. This is like, who is the person I'm building this for, right? And that may be another DJ and trader in the trenches, but what you're really trying to understand is like, who is that audience, okay? Because that audience is going to be broken up into different types of people, sometimes called archetypes, and they are normally the best way for you to rationalize how you make a decision. So let's say you want to do a big staking protocol or a big DeFi protocol, then your target audience might be a fund manager, it might be a family office, and it might be an early crypto investor. Now they would sort of be like different types of customers, and they would have different wants and needs. So trying to call out those different types of customers, and then trying to understand what they want from a solution like you're going to build, rather than it just being cool tech. Because if you've got a service that already exists and you're already on that platform and you're already staking, then you're not necessarily going to easily bring them over, in which case you need to do sort of what we call red ocean marketing, which is like, token farming, a whole bunch of mechanisms try to bring people over. But at some point you'll end up back in a position where you'll be in a direct competitor relationship with these people. So trying to understand what is that they want. The big thing is to have like a consistent interview and to ask lots of people. Like I was just at CoinFest in Bali, and I asked a lot of people the same sorts of questions about the products that I was working on, asking them, like how much they spend on this type of stuff, how often they trade, when's the last time you did a trade, what chains are you operating on, what's the size of change, how long's your hold periods, and then having the same sorts of questions, these interview questions. Now, I have them as interview questions, more like bullet points that I want to ask, but I don't sit there with a checklist and go through 1, then 2, then 3, because that breaks the conversation flow. But what I do is I ensure that in the conversation flow, I'm asking these questions and gathering that information. So it's a conversation that I'm having with these people. And don't get me wrong, it sometimes was at an event. It was standing in line waiting for a Grab or a Gojek. Like the opportunity to do customer discoveries is basically you need to go to wherever your customer is. And for me, this customer was at a crypto conference, so there was lots of opportunities for me to do customer interviews, but they weren't structured in an interview perspective. Like I didn't schedule a meeting, I didn't ask people if they've got 10 minutes or whatever, but I do also do that, and I do that with given traders and different people who I'm looking for, and I ask them for like a Zoom call and try to have a conversation about the problem space. Now, one of the big things is I'm trying to discover the customer that I think will buy my product and their problem set and what they're looking for, but I'm not discussing my solution at this stage. I'm not showing them my product and saying, would you use this? Because I want them to talk to me a bit more about what's interesting to them, what they do. And I collect that information like post every interview. I'll write down some notes, or I'll take an audio note, which is what I was doing on my phone. And I would just speak to it saying, right, spoke to such and such, and I'll just run through the points. And then that then gets converted into text. And then I can review those different people. I'll classify that person into like what I would call an archetype, and then see if there's patterns across those individuals for things that they're interested in. And then I'm looking at the feedback that they give back to me. One of the other parts in the feedback was language. I want to know the words that people are using, and ensure that I'm using that same phrasing when I'm speaking to next people, and then working on that phrasing to see if that resonates with that potential archetype or not. And to be clear, my customer segments are probably going to like change over time. And so I'm looking at these different archetypes and different classifications. And then based on some of those conversations, I think of questions which are more relevant, and I'll go back and add those in. So this is like customer discovery 101, which is really trying to understand who you're selling to. And that becomes very important in MVPs. And then it becomes very important in marketing back to your MVP. So I am sort of laboring on the customer discovery part, which is sometimes lacking in the hackathon, where we just jump in and say, here's a new technology. Like, for example, here's the Seeker phone. Like I'm building on the Seeker phone. What can I whack on this? And we just do like a Me Too product. And we spend all this time, we build a beautiful product, but then no one uses it. And that's really because the need from the user isn't there. And they might come play with it, but they'll put it down pretty quickly. Okay, so one sort of distilled book, which I'd recommend for anyone, and it's like $10 if you want to get it on Gumtree. There's podcasts or whatever, is The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick. Now, he went through Y Combinator, and Y Combinator sort of teach you this sort of customer discovery, trying to really understand who your customer is in order to like build better products and sell easier. But what he's done is really distill that without all the academic learning, and tells you things like the psychology of questions, open-ended questions, closed-ended questions. Because if you do what we call a leading question, right? If you ask, do you agree with me on something? Most people will just agree with you, right? And the reason it's called the mom test is you don't ask your mom, you're obviously American, for advice because they love you and they think you're awesome and they're just going to give you great advice. Most people will not give you critical advice. They will actually give you platitudes, say it's great, you keep going. But what they'll do is they'll say it's missing certain features or it's missing certain functionality, and then they'll try to step outside of the customer base. You need to be very careful about this, because what you can do is you can start to chase these people by adding new features that they don't really want, and it's not necessarily going to get you extra customers or extra stuff. So I've seen that over the years where we add new features or we add some functionality that people say that they want, and then you spend a lot of time building those features and functions, and then they don't get the usage. All right. So in that instance, it was really more a deflection feature rather than a desired feature. And so the mom test is like a very short book. There's podcasts that go through that mechanism. And I think that combined with sort of the questions and answers that I put on the last slide will really give you a good understanding of what people want, why they want it. And one big thing that I like to do is ask people, what's your top 10 concerns in X? Or are you interested in X or are you interested in Y? And what I'm trying to do is, say my startup is over here, I'm trying to like see if what I'm doing is inside their interest sphere. So there's a concept of like direct marketing where I need to get in front of you, and what we call pull-through marketing, where people are actively looking for a problem or a solution. Okay. And if I can find that pull-through, that you're actively looking for, a new product or something that, like, the Seeker mobile app store has got people actively looking for games, for example. So it's got a pull-through marketing. It'll be a time-sensitive pull-through marketing, but it does have pull-through marketing. Where other things, people aren't aware that it exists, or it's not a big enough problem, which is sometimes what we call a zombie business, where it offers a little bit of value, but not a lot of value. So people don't look for it. Okay. And no one really builds it because there's not a lot of money to be made in building it. So those problems don't get solved. Now you want to try to understand if what I'm building will get users. And through that, we're trying to understand that the problem space is of interest to these people. If I just whack out my product and say, would you use this? It's a binary answer of yes and no, right? And normally people will say yes, but that isn't going to tell you if they're actively looking for products in that space. So the whole discovery interview piece is to take your product idea, what you're building, and be quiet about it. And like, don't sell your product and solution. Validate demand in the market and validate that people would use a product like you're building, because you're trying to understand what they want, not give them critique on the product that you've built. Okay. Because if they're not your customer, what they say to you is relatively irrelevant. The advice that you take is a detour, probably down the wrong path, and it could be taking you further away from what your potential customers do want. So you need to be very selective of the information that you take advice. So I like to think of it like a matrix of, right, I'm going to put all these people together in what we would call a cohort, an archetype. So it might be like for me, I'm doing some AI video sort of trading stuff. So for me, it's sort of right. I've got a 18 to 22-year-old meme coin trencher guy who's active on Solana. And then I'm like, how active are they? Are they in the trenches, or are they a later stage meme coin trader? And I'll break those up into two sort of archetypes. And then I'll speak to those people and I'll mark in my mind which one they are. And then be like, well, the active trencher, he might use my product straight away, but the other one who's like a big meme coin holder, he's still sitting on a centralized exchange, they're not going to be a customer segment for me. So while it's good to understand all of these customers, the questions that I'm asking, I start to place those in, and I still have what we would call an open-ended question structure to try to get as much information out as possible. I know it's hard with this very abstract conversation that I'm having, but I know that there's people who will be doing very different types of products. Like if you think about DeFi, is it for the small person? Is it for like a financial, a VC fund? Is it for someone else? They may be very different people, right? So a VC fund, for example, I might have like the analyst who would be the user, but I also need to convince the fund manager who's the customer. So they would be two sort of archetypes in that scenario where I've got like an actual user who'd be interested in like, the interface and how well it works, where the fund manager might be more interested in like security and auditing and integration. And then that would be different again to like the independently wealthy individual who was early in crypto, who might be much more willing to try to do different stuff. But then you might want to bracket those in finding out if this person is a yield farmer seeker who will constantly, leave your product for the next short-term incentive program. Because if you optimize for them, you'll have a short-term live and then they'll move off to the next one. So that's what I mean about like trying to ask these questions and then categorize these people. And then that framing will help you significantly when we move forward. So I just basically discussed this about target audience, market segmentation, and customer personas. I should have clicked the button. But these personas I normally give names to, and I will then continue to use these names forever, or they'll evolve over time. And when you come to me and talk to me about like marketing, or you come to me and you talk about like, we're going to launch some new features, or we're going to pivot the product, I'd be like, who's it for, right? which of these customer personas are we trying to solve here? Okay, and different personas might fit in different market segments. So for example, my MVP might fit one customer segment because they're happier, with high risk, or they're going to hit a small section, and I'll need to build out additional features to hit like the next persona. So this sort of scoping is particularly important. What we all want to get to building, products is what we call problem solution fit. Okay, and problem solution fit is that you're actually building stuff that people want to use, rather than just building like the coolest interface, a swanky widget, which may look beautiful and get a little bit of traction on X, for example. What you'll find is they'll drop off pretty quickly as they move off to the next problem. So problem solution fit, it can be, time, entertainment, making money, but what we call them is sort of like vitamins versus aspirin. So vitamins people like take for a while and then they dump and they move over to another one, where an aspirin is something that people continually will purchase and use, and that will give you more sustainability. The customer interviews I described before is trying to understand pain points. When I'm talking to people about like the trading or what they're looking for, and then I'm trying to understand the issues that they're having, and then I'm sort of trying to create like a mapping of those. The solution stuff I ask people is like, if you had a magic wand, what would you do? Or if you could change anything, how would you change it? Or if you could, say they're bitching and moaning about a wallet or an exchange, you'd say like, well, if you could change it, what do you think that you would do it? And I'm not saying that you should go do those features or jump into those, but you're looking for patterns that sort of hopefully align with what you're trying to do. Okay, so like for example, I have like some voting in the system that I'm working on, which is like a decision market. And one of the sort of feedbacks that I received last week or the last couple of weeks was I have like a delayed voting, and that was sort of like not interesting. Now, people thought it was great, but when I was talking about in more detail about the solutions and the assumptions that I had, they were like, well, that's too far away and I probably wouldn't come back, right? So then I'm like iterating on that solution and like changing up the product to actually bring that further forward into the user experience, because the assumptions that I had that I'd get you excited and then you'd stick around probably isn't there. And I was incorrect in the solutions that I was talking to, because I was talking to the wrong archetype who was much more passionately aligned with longer term engagement. And when I went outside that to the like more of like my standard buyer user, then that feedback came back a lot more stronger, that the assumptions that I had made from the previous conversations were incorrect. So speak to as many people as you can to ensure that that's what you're looking for. And there's no guarantee I've got product solution fit at this stage. I'm just trying to articulate it with a real life example and just showing you that this is the processes that I go through as well. You will go through this even when you launch a product. It's very rare that the first version is correct. That's why you want to try to do a beta, even if it's, you can push it live and change it, rebrand it. You can do a whole bunch of stuff. But the big point is trying to build a product in market that people will use and will solve a problem for them, and they'll come back using it over and over. We've seen like vampire attacks from one project on another with different tokenomics. They rarely work. They normally fizzle out and the people roll back to the one that's there. So while we can do some very clever marketing sort of engagement mechanisms, it does fall back to this problem solution fit that you're looking for in order to have like long-term traction. All right, let's talk about like the prototyping ladder, because everyone here is probably building some new stuff. So once you've sort of like defined, the problem space that you're looking for, and it's best to think about like, how do I articulate this into a tweet or like a couple of lines so that I can articulate this to someone else, what the problem is that I'm solving. People's attention spans are very short. So if you can't sort of like distill it down, you will have some sort of issues, in clearly articulating what you're trying to do. And you can do a this, then that, or, it's product A plus product B, which then shortcuts a lot of stuff because people understand them. And then have an idea of like how you would solve this, because there's lots of different ways of solving it, right? So what are those solutions that we're looking for, and how do I get those out as quickly as possible? Now, anyone here can use a pen and a piece of paper. So you can use products like Prototype on Paper. You can physically get a piece of paper and you can just start drawing mobile phone apps. And you can take pictures over them and you can stitch them together. Now, we can also use AI tools to fully go out and like generate prototypes. But at this very low fidelity stage, what I find is that you'll get people to talk about the idea, where if you come to them with a relatively polished product, you fall away from the abstract idea phase and people start telling you about the interface itself, or the button colors, or the logo looks too much like something else. And that sort of, they've sort of like jumped past the stage where you're trying to discuss about value. So don't like rush if you're doing like the early stage of a prototype to make it look pretty. Making it look actually rough can be beneficial in doing early validations to make sure you're building the right type of thing. And even if it's like fully on chain, there's nothing wrong of creating like 2 prototypes and then having a look at which one is resonating with users before jumping into doing a better version. So we're like almost A/B testing the ideas that we're looking for as quickly as possible. So just a reminder, you can do that like with a piece of paper, show it to people. There's a bunch of tools, but like Pop, with Prototype on Paper is one that I've used and got other people to use, because you just take a phone, you take a picture of a drawing on a notebook, and you can sort of stitch together an application. Realistically, at this stage, you don't necessarily need anything else built, because what you're trying to do is like show people how something would work or how it would solve that problem. You don't actually think of it like it's just movie world, not a house, because you're really just saying if somebody likes it or if somebody thinks it's a good idea, and then we can move to the next stage of like building it, because the building of it takes a lot longer. So you really want to make sure that you're building the right thing, rather than building a full product and then shipping it and seeing if anyone wants it. Okay, but we'll get in a bit more about prototyping tools. As I mentioned before, usability testing and A/B testing with the ability to do interface work, which is the main interactions that people have, and the ability to do some sort of usability testing, which is like clicking through flows and so forth. These methods are probably some of the easiest ways for you to get feedback straight away. Like I, for example, did a thing with the NRL several years ago, and we sent them like a Figma prototype, and then I put it in, and then we had like tracking on like a live Figma prototype, and I saw that they used it like 200 times. So I was able to see that this customer was interested in like a joint venture from our current product with them because of the engagement that they had. And I was able to see which bits they liked and which bits they didn't like. So then when we were able to craft like a joint venture product, we were able to know which parts of the system would they had an interest in and which they didn't. And then we were able to A/B test some of that with them as well. But A/B testing is the best thing that you can do, and getting it out as many people as possible. All right, so prototyping ideas will kick into tools pretty quickly. So sketching ideas, the best thing I do is I have a notebook. I literally have a notebook right here, and I draw and I put ideas in a pen and a piece of paper. Also, if you're thinking about it late at night, sometimes it's good to have it beside the bedside table so you can write down some stuff and actually get to sleep. Because I don't know about you, but a lot of crypto happens late at night, and then I'm lying in bed thinking, and I'm like, oh, I could do this and we could connect this together. The really cool thing about crypto is how the blockchain is open for everyone. So I can connect together to this product, I can connect together to that product, and I can create like a Lego system. So think about that, just rough ideas. You don't need to go through the wireframing, but it's something to just jot down, go away, come back, think about it again if you do it another way. Then wireframing is super easy as well these days. And then you can knock one of those out really quickly. You can upload pictures from your sketches into some of these tools, which we'll get to in a sec. And then you can do user testing. So there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do in user testing. You can also use things like Inspectlet, which allows you to like embed like screen recording into applications so you can see usage. I like to get on calls and get people to use it, and I can watch them. And sometimes I'll get people to use it who are not like technically savvy. Like my product, I got my 15-year-old to use it. and I bribed her with some taking her out shopping, and then sat down and got her to use the product. And at the end of it, I had like a page of notes of stuff that I had, what we call the curse of knowledge, where I knew how the product worked, but she did not know. And I'm like literally taking notes going, okay, well, I'll need to change that, and I need to change that, and I need to change that. Because they say a UI is like a joke. If it has to be explained, it's not very good. Okay, so you really want your user interface to be as good as possible. There are things like usertesting.com, which you can get people to pay to use your products. I wouldn't recommend that, because if it's not your target audience, you're optimizing for the wrong people. But there are things you can do around incentivizing user testing, but be careful, because the people who do the incentive stuff aren't necessarily your primary user, in which case then you're potentially optimizing for the wrong individual. But as quickly as possible, and I think in the hackathon, if people are interested, it could be really good to get used to share like in the Telegram groups with each other, check out each other's products, understand that there's like a cohort of individuals here who are all working on stuff. And having people to actually come check your product out would be very useful. Yeah. Sal, you mentioned someone wants to say hi. Do you want them to jump in now, or do you want to do it later?
Oh, no, not yet, not yet.
Okay, no problem. All right, so like the minimum viable approach is like the core tenet of startups, and that's Web 2 and Web 3. But what we have today with the AI tools is an absolute destruction in the cost of trying new stuff. So previously we'd have to raise a large amount of money, have a designer, have someone knock something up, but we can actually get something on a screen really quickly these days. So just because you can go really quickly doesn't mean as soon as you get something, you should just throw it out the door. But it does mean that anyone on this call could be the builder of the next product, the next massive product. And it does mean that we can push to user testing really quickly. There are mechanisms that we can use around A/B testing. Can be like two separate brands, right? So you can think you can have brand A and brand B. So if I don't know who my customer is, or I'm trying to figure out the customer segments, I might create a version of the product for one person, like an MVP, and another, and then do a little bit of sort of marketing, as in, Twitter posts, outreach, or even Facebook marketing for like $100 or whatever, and see who clicks on what links, and actually determine where there's interest. But just really articulating that, we can build these mechanisms really quickly, which allows you to get to testing quicker, which means that you can do more experiments, and just the fact that it doesn't have to be in your primary brand, because people get very emotionally attached to their primary brand. So think about a secondary brand that you can sort of operate that on just for experimental purposes, not that you'll launch two brands. All right, and feature prioritization. So I didn't really talk about this too much, but there is a core set of features that you want to be going live with. One of the biggest problems with MVPs is there's no minimal part of it. It's just a giant collection of features. So when you start to think about, like, if I was to go live with this, who would be my customer? And then which of these archetypes could be my customer? Think about like a Venn diagram where they overlap. Like, what's the features that only these two people need, okay? And if it's only those two sets of people need those features, then they're probably the only features you should be building, because that's the minimum that you need to do to make those people happy with your product or service, okay? So if you think about like a DeFi protocol, there are lots of like liquidity providers, there's lots of like custom wallet stuff that could be done. They're all like future extensions, and this is where the feature prioritization over time comes. But if you break it down to, right, I'm building this for this type of person, then you can start to look at what's the maximum overlap. Will they use a product that I'm building, and that the users are happy to do that. And so looking at the other options in the market as well to bring something unique into the market, which is evaluate competitors, adding a feature that an existing competitor does have does not necessarily bring differentiation into the market, which means you don't have something to compare and contrast to. A lot of these features are what I would call expected innovation. So if you add them, you're not necessarily going to get any new customers coming from them. Now, that's different to what we would call churn, which is the losing of customers from a lack of them. But realistically, you need people to come through the front door before they go out the back door. So, targeting, having, differentiation features that map to the archetypes is probably like a major thing that you want to be doing. I know this sounds like very abstract, but it doesn't need to be, and it can actually be a lot simpler than it needs, than I'm probably articulating at this point. The other big thing is creating a roadmap of like what features you're going to do and why you're going to do them. So if we look at those archetypes, that might be, the small fish, the wheel, the such and such, and they'll want like connections into squads, or they'll want other mechanisms, or features. You would then break those into roadmap features, and each roadmap feature should really unlock something. When you think about roadmap planning, does it unlock a new market segment? Like, let's say I'm going to integrate with a new DEX or something else, which then unlocks a bunch of customers. So those roadmaps should try to like give me definitive value rather than just a collection of features. And then, if you're speaking to people, you can rejig that roadmap based on the information that you're looking for as well. All right. So the big takeaway from this is me as Mr. KFC man, which is the value nugget. Okay. There are a lot of products that do a lot of stuff, but when I see you on a lift or I see you in a tweet, I want you to tell me what is that tiny bit of value, because you've got a very low brand footprint. Most people will not look at the 15, 16 things that your product might do. It will look at that one, that sort of lighthouse of what is it that you do that's different to everyone else, that what I call the value nugget. Now, if I find that nugget and I like it, I'll come back and I'll check out the rest of the menu and I'll be like, oh yeah, but this is the thing that drives people to your product. Okay. So while you can build like lots and lots of interesting stuff, and you can have things like with a mobile phone, you can have like, LLMs on device, but an LLM on device is not necessarily a value feature that people will be interested in, that will bring them to it. So think of it as like there's supplementary menu items that people are like, oh, that's nice. Oh, I like that. But is that going to actually bring people, to the customer, or sorry, the customers to your product space, or get attention in the market? So for every person, it's going to be different. And positioning that is hard as well. So what you'll find is you'll need to use different language. So like, I mentioned just like LLMs, but like talking to my wallet, like that's a value statement that I get, which the LLM supplies, versus like the fact that it's like an LLM on device. But then there may be better ways of delivering that value rather than having it on device. And whether it's on device or not doesn't necessarily bring into the value that you're delivering. But in saying that, it's really technically cool. And as a tech guy, I love that stuff. But as someone who's trying to give you advice on how to actually move from idea to MVP to actually making a business and growing startups, then we need to start thinking more about who am I selling to and what do they want. If they want ice cream for breakfast, we sell them ice cream for breakfast. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, the customer is mostly always right. It isn't exactly true, because if you're bringing a brand new product to market or something that's not been there, they will not be able to articulate something they don't understand. Okay. Ford was famous for saying, if you ask people what they want, they'd want faster horses, not cars. And with blockchain and with Solana, for example, there's a whole new set of functionality and stuff that people will not comprehend. So there's a balancing act here, which is very much the entrepreneur, which is like trying to get the information that we're looking for, trying to see that people are interested, and then pushing that as far as we can to the right. But if I take out the technology, if I take out the blockchain, if I take out LLMs, what am I doing for you? Do you know what I mean? So it's it could be unstoppable, it could be the speed, but there's a value. So just to articulate the value, and this is the core thing that we're going to sort of try to deliver with our MVP. All right. So essential concepts for the MVP is the market fit and the customer engagement. Just building stuff doesn't mean anyone's going to use it. So am I building the features for that market, that Venn diagram? And when I do, can I get people to use it? And do they stick around using it? Okay. So these incentive programs that we often do are farming issues. What you'll find is as soon as the farming ends, your users will just disappear off to the next farmer. That isn't going to help you for long-term success because those are not necessarily the best customer. We may want them at the start because you think about it, if you're going to have a party, you need some people to come to bring the next people to bring the next people. And that's where you come back into the archetypes of what you're doing for each one. But active engagement being using the product, that might be TVL, that might be number of trades, that might be user signups or like information collected, but you need to be sort of ensuring that you are collecting this information to determine that you are on the right path. And if not, the quicker you know this, the quicker you can try something else. Okay, sustainability practices, which is then research. So I consider this like a loop that you do over and over. So you're doing your research. That could be like, I'm going to enter a new market. That could be geographic. We're all here in Australia and New Zealand, but culturally people are different in different parts of the world. So you might be saying like, I want to target the US or I want to target the UK and Ireland. So what would I do? A design phase, which is, do I need to change some stuff? Not everyone has the same layouts or the same apps. If you look at apps, you'll see like culturally some different people have a lot of different stuff in their apps. So something that works in one market may not work in another, and you might want to sort of look at how you do that. You go through your construction, quality analysis, and then your final evaluation. And you could just keep doing this over and over, but you want to be as quickly as possible so that you're able to learn as much as you can. All right, and then these feedbacks. The big thing is like what's important in the feedbacks. As I mentioned before, it could be TVL, could be user signups, could be engagements. If I'm running a social network, I need people to basically connect other people in. So think about like a mechanism for what we call the K factor, which is the virality of the app. So if I bring you in, I want you to bring 2 of your friends in, okay? And if I can't get you to onboard your friends, then I'm not really going to have a successful social network. Okay, so understanding what that metric is to sort of look for that optimization, and then the MVP, for example, it might just be like connecting it in to make people connect together to like become king of the hill of an area or some other mechanisms that we're looking for. Having interviews with people who use the product, like after they've used it, tell me what you like, you didn't like. If you become big, you will not be able to do this. So this is the time where you might be able to get some good feedback from individuals. And please, as a group, think about supporting each other and using each other's products and giving each other some mechanisms in order to do it, and then sort of analyze. Remember, you don't need to take everyone's advice and you don't have to change stuff. So just because someone says they don't like it or they think it should change doesn't mean you should change it. You need to determine if you think that advice is accurate, and then implement the changes that you want, and then see if that makes a difference. Sometimes it does not make a difference. Like some of the things that I've done, people would be crazy with. Like I launched a social network back in 2016 with no user reset flow because there was a big event that we were going to with an in-person activation. And we got thousands and thousands of users, and it was only like 3 people that tried to reset their password. So we just manually did it for them until we were there. But this sort of like feedback of like what's important, how do I get it, is useful. And especially if you've got no users, you don't have any feedback. So the quicker you get out, the quicker you get feedback. All right, and remember to write stuff down. As we say, like measuring stuff is super important. You will sort of forget things. You will redefine the goalposts if you don't have like definitions of what's successful. So for me, I'll be like, right, I want this many users in like, this week, or I want this many conversations to have, or these sorts of mechanisms to determine if I'm hitting those, because you will make excuses if you're not hitting them, and you'll constantly redraw history. And it's better to understand if you're going down the right path. You might be slower, but down the right path. If not, do I need to change what I'm doing? Do I need to change the feature set, or do I need to pivot entirely because no one cares about this thing anymore? Is the meta over? Because you know, the meta's moved pretty quickly here. Okay, and then vibe coding. So I'm just going to jump into some tools pretty quickly now and show you which ones are some of the ones that I recommend using. Okay. So like the big ones that everyone should use that are, you know, first of all is like Google Trends to see if people are interested in anything, which is more of your research ones. If we're talking about like MVPs and trying to build stuff, the two big ones are Lovable, okay, and V0 from For Sale. Now, if you're a developer like me, I already have a bunch of stuff running on For Sale. So you can see I already have an account in here and I use this quite a bit. But have a look at the templates and the community stuff that's already here. Have a look at, you know, like Dribble and some others as people do redesigns for products. But it can give you an idea of you know, what can be done. And a lot of these you can just fork as well. And Lovable is the same. So these ones, the reason I suggest these is they're really good for MVPs. They come with Superbase, which is a database as a service. So you can persist your information, sign up, log in, and you can actually have something running really quickly. And like we can build a product, you know, straight away. So like I did a demo, another demo on Lovable. Now I primarily use V0, but like we can just come in here and say we want a mobile app that tracks crypto traders meme coin sales. All right, now this isn't necessarily going to be, you know, the same for everyone, but if you're thinking about like, how do I describe what I want to do, this will create a interface for you that you can publish, you can send people to, you can like put in mock data if you want to try and experience. It will start to knock out a bunch of website for you. Most of the products that I do now start with sort of an AI MVP. Prototypes, I'll do the same sort of way. And then from there, I'll take that code base and then I'll bring it into like Cursor, which is a code editor. And then I use Claude primarily as my primary coding agent. And then I'll modify it, refactor it, because AI tools have got a habit of spewing out lots of repetitive code. And then I'll try to refine that as much as I can into something that's much more usable. But my point is, like, while we're doing this talk, it's actually kicking off a database backend. You can invite other people in. I've got a database and you can push it to GitHub as well. Okay, it's taking a little longer than I expected. Last time it was done pretty quickly. But you can see it's actually creating a component trading activity. Now, these are great for MVPs. I would say you're starting to get a little bit of a sameness in products. So having like a designer, if you're going to go live and actually go hard with this and getting like full UI designs being done is very useful. But if I take this and I use like V0 as well, in V0, I can create a new chat and I can actually like give it a screenshot, okay? Or I can import a Figma and I can tell it I want a landing page. So I can look at another product. So let's say I've got a Web 2 product, because one of the biggest opportunities is taking Web 2 products that are not on chain and bringing them on chain. I can go to that product, I can go through, I can click all of the interface bits that I think is interesting, and I can go clone from screenshot, and it will then create me mocks of those. I can then use the AI tool that I want in here, or I can mark through a bunch of different stuff. Like I have, these are ones that I have, right? And so here's the tournaments thing that I currently have, which is like a prototype. Now I've published this, for example. I can also fork this. So I can come down and see like lots of different versions here. I can also fork this particular one because it's just a prototype. Where's the fork button? The fork button is somewhere. A duplicate. So I can duplicate this, it used to be called fork, and then I can create a second version. So with this version, I can, let me see. With this version, I can get it to a point and say, okay, I've got this base, concept. Now I think I'm ready to customize it for one archetype or another archetype, and then I can fork that version into copy that chat. So I've still got the base one, and think of it like cattle. I can modify it. And if I don't like it, I'll just delete the whole thing, go back and fork it again. So I assume everyone is techie enough to know that you can just copy the code over and over. Now, the reason why you want to do that a lot is also because sometimes the AI gets a bit lost and start changing stuff you don't want it to change. So make sure you do a lot of version control, a lot of forking. But as you can see here, this is the meme coin tracker that I asked it to do. And you can see like trading activity, meme coins. So it's got like a bunch of functionality that's sort of like plugged in, and we can iterate through here. It's got the components that we can look through from the code perspective. And you can even speak to it as well. So you can like tell it to, I want this above here. I want to move this right. I want to add login features. So you can have like a continuous conversation and add new features and get it to modify those different ones. So these tools are really good for creating like MVPs, user prototypes, and getting stuff out as quickly as possible, getting people to use it, and then sort of like sometimes maybe even fake the transaction so you can get it into someone's hand really quickly, and then go off and work on the smart contracts and then plug those in. So I just really wanted to bring attention to the two tools that I would recommend people to use, being Lovable and V0, which then bring through into the rest of the usage. So they're my favorite vibe coding. There are other vibe coding tools. You know, if there's one that you recommend, share it with the rest of the group. I'm sure other people would love to use them. But yeah, just avoiding the pitfalls. So now it's quicker for us to build anything that we can think of. We need to do more market research. We need to make sure that what we're building is what people want. And because of the cost, we can build tiny products now, what we call micro SaaS, micro businesses that are very targeted, because the internet allows us to create very niche products through a lot of people. So don't worry about it being like small, because if it's small with an active customer base, you can still have a very successful product. Don't ignore customer feedback. As I said, there's always a duality in this stuff of don't do everything everyone tells you. You need to sort of think about it for yourself, but don't ignore everyone, because then you're probably doing the wrong thing. And the other issue is with the MVP stuff. It's just over promising features in like your marketing funnel, so that when people come in to use it, it doesn't do half the stuff that they thought it was going to do, and then they bail, and you could have just wasted your time onboarding them. So understanding that value nugget and just delivering that value nugget is probably the best thing that we can do. And then the other big thing I see an issue with some of this stuff is poor team communication. So if you're working in a team, understanding in your own team dynamics, who's doing what, when stuff are going to get completed, and when you've got like shared execution time. Ineffective teams means you could be duplicating work. You could be making going through some stuff that's not particularly useful, and that mismanaged resources is a great example where you might be doing experiments with marketing, spending money on advertising, and then realizing that you're wasting those entirely. So yeah, that's sort of like the largest part of my talk, basically saying about like how you can connect this stuff together, create matrices to make better decisions, try to really understand who you're building your feature of value for. You can use those around prioritization of features, release windows, a whole bunch of mechanisms like that. And I've been focusing on sustainable growth in this talk rather than like viral marketing growth, which is more about making a splash. The success, in my opinion, of long-term startups is like validating that you're building the right thing. Otherwise, you're just really trying. You might stumble into it, but you're increasing your chances if you validate. Then you've got the ability to build and execute something, and then you've got a business model where it actually pays for itself and potentially makes some more money, which then gives you fuel inside your venture, which means you can continue to work on it, improve it, market it, and actually accelerate. And the intersection of those three things is where you generally have a startup success. So that's the end of my talk. If anyone's got any questions, you're more than welcome to ask away. Okay, well, if no one wants to put their hand up and ask a question, I just would recommend again to check out the Lovable and V0 for your execution of MVPs to be able to build stuff very quickly. If you prefer to use pen and a piece of paper, I think that's a great starting location. Remember, you can plug those into the likes of V0. You can take a picture of your sketches. You can send it over. Sorry, it looks like we've got a question. Do we have a question? Josh, I don't see that question. Is it in? Hold on.
No, I don't see anything.
I'm just going to message him there was a question, but I can't see the question. Okay. So unless there's a question, I just reiterate that, getting a notebook, coming up with some ideas, bouncing it off some people, doing some polls on Twitter is always good. But I focus very much on like how to build a sustainable startup. Remember, a hackathon doesn't have to be a sustainable startup launcher. You can just play with new technologies, and we welcome that too. You can just build some absolutely cool tech and have a ball, learn some new technologies. But I've been more focused because of my startup-y background as how do I take you from just building a cool tech to potentially helping you build a business that lets you unlock and have a great career building cool products.
Darren, it's Shane here. I thought I'll ask you a question while I got you, mate.
Mm-hmm.
The two programs you mentioned at the end, Lovable and the other one,
V0.
what are they? Yeah, V0 was it?
Yep.
Are they free or are they paid?
They both have free tiers, so you can use both of them for free. There are certain things which are token gated, but I think they're like $20 a month, so they're inexpensive. But I believe both of them have got a free tier, so you wouldn't have to pay any money to be able to get in and get a prototype or very basic MVP done, and then export that out and then deploy it yourself. V0 is owned by For Sale, which is a big hoster. So anyone who's actually builds products probably knows For Sale. And they both generate React code. But they're more the visual side, and then you would export that and connect in the likes of Claude code or something else. If you actually want to do some more of the blockchain coding and integration with Web3, I don't find that those tools are particularly good at recent library versions. So they're going to bring you old Solana code.
Gotcha. No, that sounds really cool, and thanks for elaborating on that one.
Not a problem. I think that they're really useful tools. Remember, look at what else is there. The fact that you can screenshot existing products. It doesn't give you like great hierarchy of components. Just remember that. Like these are more a stepping stone. So when you get it and you go to pull out the code, what you'll find is that there's lots of like one page with lots of code in it rather than lots of components that a developer would build for you. So it's still very vibe coding, which is like just slapping more stuff on rather than it being like a slick car. So when you go from there to like a full product, you might have a stage of tidying up and deleting a lot of code and getting it to reuse components. But we're not at that stage here. The best thing is to understand, am I building a car someone wants before I look at making the best car that can go as fast as possible. And these tools are perfect for those. Other tools to mention would be Inspectlet, which I use regularly, or Google Events. If you're trying to detect if people are using stuff, if you connect up a database, you will see users signing up, and when they do things in the app, it will create database records. You can just look in your database to see if people are using your products or tools. But adding metrics to see what people are interested in using. But just be careful, because like we put Google metrics in a tool and we thought people were interested in a feature because we had it fire off. But when I actually put Inspectlet in, which did like screen recording, I noticed that they weren't interested in the page. What would happen is they would click it and then they'd jump out. So the funnel was interesting, but the feature itself wasn't engaging. So when I put the other metrics in, I find out that people were interested to see what it was, but weren't interested in what it did. So we had to redo that feature entirely because it showed demand, but it did not show that we were delivering value. So we had to rewrite that. Where at the start,
Gotcha.
thought it was good. So
Yeah.
it's really hard without like watching and listening to what people say to understand exactly, because there's a lot of non-verbal communication. If you ask me a question, I can answer it like yes, or I can go yes, and they're very different answers, even though it's the same words, right? So
Yeah.
don't discount the non-verbals. So outsourcing some of this stuff it can be a bad idea, because you'll lose some of that context. But it's more about talking to people, seeing what they want. Like I've talking to people all the time. Is this something you would use? When's the last time you've done that? And I'm doing something slightly different, which is relatively new in the market. So I don't have an existing thing to do, and it was difficult to get people to it. So, but I was really asking them about, their trading habits. When's the last time you traded? What platforms do you trade on? Because a lot of people say they're a trader, but they're stuck in a centralized exchange. Have they used Telegram bots? What are they trying? And I'm really just trying to flesh out what they would and see if they fit inside the archetypes that I'm interested in. And then if you were to do this, what type of things do you think is cool? And then I'm leading them down the path to figure it out. And I find that to be very beneficial for my trip to Bali. That was really, really good for me to be able to talk to so many people. So just remember, online is great. If there is an event, a meetup, it's worth getting to. If there is a local group, attend the local group, ask those people. If there may be a Telegram group, we've got the Solana ANZ group. It's probably good to ask in there, but the world's a big place. And yeah, engage people, find out what you're doing, and build some cool shit. So like, I think that's probably it for the questions and answers. I know we've run like a full hour. We will be still available. I'm one of the mentors on the program. I won't be available constantly, but I will be available during the rest of it. Please help each other. These builder groups are super important to be able to give constructive feedback to each other. But try each other's products, fill out each other's requests. You can do, a Google form with questions. You can send that out to a group of people. You could do something like, a winner gets a free soul or something like that. If you're trying to incentivize people in order to give you that feedback. Or you can just play with some technology and come build some cool stuff. So you don't have to do those things. This is not a startup only program. I'm just trying to help you guys move from, playing with the tech to how do I play with the tech and build something that will bring me in a bunch of revenue, and we can build Australia as, an awesome place for launching cool on-chain startups. So I'll throw it back to Sal if you're still there. I think there was someone wanted to have a quick conversation if they're still around.
Yeah, no, they haven't come back, so maybe they'll join in a tomorrow session. It's obviously hard for people overseas because they're probably putting people to sleep or going out for dinner. So all good. But that was awesome, Darren. Thank you. Got a lot of people, giving you the thumbs up and the hearts. So well done. Thank you. So as Darren pointed out, his contact details are on the screen. We will end it there, and this will be available again as a replay 24/7 for the next 7 weeks. So if you missed anything, just go rewatch it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, see you in the groups. Good luck building, folks.